Parents forced me to pay for sister's wedding, but I wasn't invited, so I canceled arrangements. They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your blood family treats you like you're water under the bridge? That's exactly what happened to me, and you won't believe the roller coaster that followed. My name is Chloe, I'm 27 years old, and I've built a pretty great life for myself, thanks to my own hard work and the incredible support of my fiancé, Ethan. Now, you might be wondering about my family. Well, let's just say it's complicated. In fact, they're the reason I'm here, needing to vent and maybe get some advice from you all. To understand why I'm reaching out, I need to give you some background. Like I said, things with my family have always been messy. It's been this way for as long as I can remember. The Millers adopted me because they couldn't have kids of their own. But it was always clear, even as a child, that they didn't really love me for me. It felt more like they wanted to fill a hole in their lives, the hole of not having a biological child. Don't get me wrong, I'm not ungrateful. I truly appreciate that they chose me and gave me a life that was, on paper, better than what I might have had in the foster care system. But when you looked closer, it wasn't always that different emotionally. Still, for the first few years, things were okay. Actually, maybe even good. I wasn't spoiled, but I felt loved, or at least, I felt enough love. And at that age, coming from where I came from, that was enough. I was content. But everything changed when I was around 4 years old. My mom, against all odds, got pregnant. Suddenly, overnight, everything shifted. I don't remember one specific moment, but it was like I became invisible. They were over the moon about the new baby, my younger sister, Tiffany. Of course, I was excited to be a big sister, but from the moment Tiffany was born, it felt like I just ceased to exist in their world. It hurt. A lot. They never said it outright, but it was painfully obvious they just didn't want me anymore. It was like I was just a stand-in until Tiffany arrived to claim her real spot in the family. I started feeling like a mistake, an inconvenience they were stuck with. For a little girl who just wanted to feel loved and important, it was devastating. I tried to keep things the way they were, to stay close to them, but the more I tried, the more they pushed me away. It wasn't that they were cruel, not in a physical way. They still provided for me, but it was clear it was out of obligation, not love. The emotional neglect, the constant feeling of being unwanted, left scars that I don't think will ever fully heal. Even Tiffany, who I loved and thought of as my sister, treated me like a stranger. She was just a baby when she came into my life, but as she grew, it became clear she didn't see me as part of her family either. She barely acknowledged me, and when she did, it was with the same indifference you'd show a neighbor you barely know. Growing up feeling like a burden was incredibly hard. That's why, as a teenager, I started pulling away from my family. It was just easier that way. I spent more time alone or with friends because I knew I wasn't going to get the emotional connection I needed from them. Sometimes, I even wondered if it would have been better if they'd never adopted me at all. It felt like they'd taken me in only to ignore me, and that kind of hurt is different. I don't know what's worse, never having a family, or having one that makes you feel like you don't matter. For me, the latter was worse because I lived in constant pain of being unwanted, right there in the same house. So, as soon as I turned 18, I moved out and put some serious distance between us. I didn't cut them off completely, we still talked occasionally, and I'd visit for holidays, but I kept them at arm's length. I focused on building a life I was proud of, a life separate from the family I grew up with. My fiancé, Ethan, has been my rock, giving me the unconditional love and support I always craved. He's shown me what a real family can feel like. Fast forward to now. I live in a different city with Ethan. We're happy, independent, and building our future together. My relationship with my parents remains distant, but I've accepted it. It doesn't mean the ache in my heart is gone, but I've learned to live with it. Until recently. Things took a completely unexpected turn when Tiffany got engaged to a guy named Brandon. Suddenly, my family is all over me. They want me to help with wedding preparations and even chip in with the costs. My parents have been messaging me nonstop, asking if I'll be involved and, of course, come to the wedding. They're painting this picture of a big family affair where my presence is essential. Tiffany herself hasn't said much, but my parents are relentless. They're trying to make it seem like we all need to come together for her special day. I'm just confused. And honestly, a little hurt. The same family that made me feel like I didn't belong is now suddenly asking me to be a central part of something so important to them. I haven't had a real conversation with Tiffany since we were kids. She's never shown the slightest interest in having a sisterly relationship with me, and now I'm expected to pretend like everything is fine, like decades of emotional neglect never happened? It's not just that though. Even though I still see them occasionally, I've spent most of my adult life protecting myself from the pain they caused me. The idea of getting involved in something that could potentially reopen all those old wounds feels dangerous. On the other hand, I know Tiffany as my sister, even if we never connected the way sisters should. Part of me wonders if this could be her way of trying to build a bridge, even if she doesn't realize it. Maybe this is exactly what I need to finally have the family I've always longed for. Perhaps this is how I can finally fill that void in my heart. And so, here I am, stuck. I really need your advice. Should I help with the wedding preparations and see this as an opportunity to mend fences with my family? Or should I keep protecting myself, as I've been doing for so long? Ethan thinks I should help if I genuinely want to. He says it's my decision, but that it could be a chance to reconnect. He's been incredibly supportive and truly understands where I'm coming from. Still, I can't shake this feeling of conflict. So, I guess I'm asking for your honest opinions. Is this worth my time and emotional energy, or should I keep my distance? I'll post an update in a few weeks. Update 1. A few weeks have passed since my first post, and I wish I had good news. I really, truly, thought this time things might be different. But here I am, sitting here absolutely furious, venting to a bunch of strangers, realizing I've been a complete and utter fool. Honestly, I don't even know why I let myself get sucked back into this toxic family drama. Deep down, maybe a tiny, naive part of me wanted to believe that my family finally cared, that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally acknowledge my worth and we could actually start fixing things. Well, spoiler alert, they didn't. After writing my initial post, I spent days reading your comments and really thinking about what to do. Many of you were so understanding and encouraging, telling me to give it a shot. Others were blunt, calling me stupid for even considering it. How I wish I had listened to the blunt ones. So, as you've probably guessed, I decided to help my family with the wedding preparations. Yeah, I know, I should have trusted my gut or listened to those of you who warned me to stay far, far away. But I thought, maybe this was their way of trying to reconnect. I wasn't expecting some fairy tale reunion or a Hallmark movie moment, but I figured if they were reaching out, there had to be some genuine sincerity behind it, right? Wrong. So wrong. Here's exactly what happened, and why I'm so unbelievably furious that I don't know what else to do but vent. After I told my parents I was willing to help with the wedding, things were almost nice for a while. My parents were more attentive than they'd been in my entire life. My mom even hugged me when I agreed to help, and I honestly can't remember the last time she did that. It was something I'd longed for so long, and like the emotional idiot I apparently am, I let my guard down. I actually started to think, maybe, just maybe, they are trying to make up for all those years of neglect. I should have known it was too good to be true. As the wedding plans moved forward, I even started to bond with Tiffany, like I never had before. It was like she was finally acknowledging me as her sister, after all this time. It felt good. But that's when things started to get weird. Tiffany started asking me for money. At first, it was small things, extra cash for decorations, a deposit for the venue. She made it sound incredibly urgent, like if she didn't pay immediately, she'd lose the reservation. She told me she had a big payment coming up herself and promised she'd pay me back in a few days. I didn't think too much of it. Money isn't really an issue for Ethan and me, and I didn't mind helping my sister out, especially with her wedding. But in the back of my mind, a little voice was whispering that something felt off. Still, every time I started to doubt things, Tiffany would turn on the charm. She'd reassure me it was just temporary, that she'd pay me back soon, and that she genuinely wanted me to be a big part of the wedding. For the first time in forever, I felt included, like the supportive older sister I'd always wanted to be. It's almost embarrassing how much I craved that feeling. So, yeah, I made a few pretty big payments. Financially, it didn't hurt us much, but emotionally, I kept feeling uneasy, like something wasn't quite right. Still, I pushed those feelings aside, thinking I was helping my family and contributing to my little sister's dream wedding. Then the bomb dropped. The day after most of the preparations were finalized, Tiffany told me I couldn't come to the wedding. After I had helped her create this perfect wedding, she said I simply couldn't be there. Her reason? She wanted the wedding to be blood family only, and since I'm adopted, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to attend. I was in shock. It felt like a physical blow. I just stood there, stunned, trying to process what she was actually saying. Blood family only? As if I hadn't been there for her since the day she was born. As if I wasn't the one who had just financially bailed them out with this whole wedding. Suddenly, all my childhood insecurities came flooding back. That's when it hit me. They never wanted to reconnect or fix things with me. They just wanted to use me. And now that they'd gotten what they needed, They were tossing me aside like yesterday's trash. They've always been this way, and I was the absolute idiot who thought, against all evidence, that things could change. I allowed myself to be used and discarded. Again. So, I left. Immediately. I didn't say a word to Tiffany or my parents. I didn't even look back. I just walked out. I was beyond furious, and honestly, I still am. Part of me is burning with anger at them, but another part is just as angry at myself for letting this happen. I should have known better. I should have trusted my instincts. But no, I let myself believe in some ridiculous fairy tale where they finally wanted me. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm done. Absolutely, completely done with them. Done with their lies, done with being the forgotten daughter they only remember when they need something. And now, I'm planning something. I don't know if it will work, but they are not getting away with this. They think they can treat me like garbage and just move on with their perfect little lives? Oh no. They're going to face the consequences. I'll update you all once I put my plan into action. Until then, goodbye. Update 2. Hi, it's Chloe again. It's been a few days since my last update, and let's just say things have gotten interesting. Or rather, karma finally showed up and did its thing. The wedding was a few days ago, and guess what? My phone hasn't stopped ringing since. And yes, it's my parents calling, non-stop. But no, they're not calling to apologize or to admit that what Tiffany did was horribly wrong. Instead, they're calling me for help. Why? Apparently, Tiffany is drowning in debt, and somehow, they think it's my fault. Remember how I mentioned I was planning something after the whole blood family only fiasco? Well, I decided that if Tiffany wanted to use me and then toss me aside like garbage, she'd have to face the consequences of her actions. After I calmed down enough to think rationally, I went and canceled every single reservation I had made for her wedding. Every single one. The deposits, the payments, everything. Some of the money I'd spent was refunded, but of course, not everything was reimbursable. I didn't care. That was the price I was willing to pay to see Tiffany struggle with the thing she valued most at that moment, her perfect wedding. Once I canceled the major arrangements, the wedding started to fall apart, and it all went downhill fast. As soon as Tiffany realized what I'd done and saw her precious wedding unraveling, she went into full panic mode, running around like a headless chicken trying to reorganize everything at the last minute. Because of the rush and desperation, she ended up having to pay way more than I had originally spent. Desperate, she took out a huge loan to cover it all. Now she's up to her neck in debt because she thought she could play me and get away with it. Well, needless to say, the wedding was an absolute disaster. Sure, it was a wedding, technically. But nothing compared to the Pinterest perfect event I had helped plan. Since everything was done last minute and in a frenzy, it turned out to be a total circus. And Tiffany was completely humiliated, or at least that's what I've heard through the grapevine. At the end of the day, though, she got married, and I guess that's what really matters to her. Except, of course, for the mountain of debt she's now stuck with. And that's why my parents won't stop calling me. They're trying to guilt trip me into helping her again. They keep saying that Tiffany is in a bad situation and that as her older sister, it's my responsibility to take care of her. See the hilarious irony here? Where was that older sister responsibility during her wedding planning? Oh right, I wasn't invited because I'm not blood. They even had the audacity to tell me I should let go of the past and be the bigger person. I actually laughed out loud when they said that. I told them, I'm not a doormat you can walk all over whenever it's convenient for you. Tiffany created this mess herself, and if she thought she could use me without any consequences, she was sorely mistaken. I also told them they should ask a blood relative for help instead. Then I hung up the phone. Honestly? It feels so good to finally stand up for myself. My whole life, I've been the forgotten one, the outsider, the one they only reach out to when they need something. But now they know, I'm done. So, Tiffany is stuck with her mountain of debt, and my parents are begging me to help her, but I just don't care. I'm done with them and their toxic behavior. They can deal with the mess they created. It's not my problem anymore. I think that's finally the end of my story. For the first time in a long while, I feel a sense of closure. And I'm actually enjoying this newfound peace with my fiancé. Well, aside from the constant ringing of my phone, but that's what the block button is for, right? Anyway, thank you all for your support through all of this. Update 3. Just when I thought it was finally over. I never imagined I'd be writing another update, but here we are, just days after the last one, because my sister has reached new lows I didn't even think were possible. After everything that had already happened, I genuinely thought I was done with all of this. But of course, Tiffany had other plans. She wasn't going to let me walk away so easily. When I refused to help her with her debt, Tiffany must have been absolutely furious. She was probably blaming me for the situation she'd put herself in. So, she decided to take things even further and mess with me even more. Bad idea, Tiffany. In her twisted mind, she thought she could get revenge on me, and honestly, it's almost laughable how miserably it all backfired. Here's what happened. A few days after I told her no, Tiffany sent a bunch of fake photos to my fiancé, Ethan. Yes, she actually had the audacity to claim she'd caught me cheating on him the night before. She even pretended to be the concerned sister, apologizing to him for what her sister had done and claiming she was embarrassed to be related to someone who could betray him like that. Can you even imagine the anger bubbling up inside me right now? This woman was trying to destroy the one truly good thing I have in my life. She needed to be put in her place, once and for all. Initially, I hadn't planned on doing anything to retaliate. I really just wanted to move on and forget they all existed. But Tiffany left me with absolutely no choice. Here's the thing, during the wedding preparations, I saw something I've kept to myself until now. I saw Tiffany kissing another man. Yes, she was full on making out with someone who was not her fiancé, Brandon. I even took photos, not because I wanted to ruin her marriage, but because I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. At the time, I decided it wasn't my place to get involved. But now, after what she tried to pull with Ethan? Why should I care about protecting her marriage anymore? So, I sent the photos to her husband, Brandon, and told him everything. Brandon didn't waste a single second. By the end of the day, Tiffany was out of the house, and he'd filed for divorce. Or annulment. I'm not sure of the exact legal term. All I do know is, they're done. Look, this isn't something I'm particularly proud of. I'm not usually one for revenge. But Tiffany left me no choice. She started this war, and I just ended it. Now Tiffany is practically ruined. She tried to crawl back to our parents, but even they wouldn't take her in. They know her debts would become their problem, and since she doesn't work, they'd be the ones stuck paying for it all. They've completely washed their hands of her. As for where Tiffany is now? I have no idea. Probably staying with some poor, unsuspecting soul who doesn't yet realize what they've gotten themselves into. But honestly, I don't care. She wanted to play with fire, so I brought the napalm. Update 4. The first thing I want to say is that while my sister, Tiffany, has definitely learned a valuable lesson about not messing with me, it doesn't mean she's suddenly figured out how to behave decently with the rest of the world. It seems her talent for creating absolute chaos is limitless, and now she's decided to target our parents. Not me, this time. After her husband filed for divorce, Tiffany finally realized she was in a much worse position than she'd imagined. Not only is she drowning in massive wedding debt, but she also needs to find a job urgently just to stay afloat. For years, she lived in the comfortable bubble of never having to worry about things like working or managing money. She always had either my parents or her husband covering for her. But now that she's lost both sources of support, she's facing a harsh reality she never thought she'd have to deal with. And this is where things get even more ridiculous. Instead of taking any responsibility for her own life choices, Tiffany has decided to sue our parents. Yes, you read that right. She's suing them. And the reason is so absurd, I promise you'll either laugh or get angry, depending on your mood. According to Tiffany, my parents should have paid for the entire wedding because, as her biological parents, it was their duty. Her twisted logic is that since my parents finally had a biological child after years of infertility, they're supposedly responsible for her happiness, and in this case, her wedding is apparently the key to that happiness. Yes, I know how insane this sounds, but in her mind, it's a brilliant plan. Tiffany is convinced that my parents forced her to take out loans for the wedding and therefore, they're the ones to blame for her debt. She's essentially suing them to recover the money she borrowed, acting like they're somehow responsible for her entire mess. I can only imagine the judge's reaction when they read her lawsuit. Honestly, I'd pay good money to be in that courtroom just to see their face as they try to process this level of family drama. I can't picture anything other than thinly veiled, suppressed laughter at how utterly ridiculous this is. Let's be real here, Tiffany was the one getting married, not my parents. If she wanted an extravagant, over-the-top wedding, she should have paid for it herself, or at least made some smarter financial decisions. And we don't even need to mention the fact that if she hadn't cheated on her husband, she wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. But of course, in Tiffany's world, everyone else is responsible for her bad decisions, except for Tiffany herself. The sheer audacity of it all. Tiffany isn't just demanding that my parents pay off her wedding debt, she's also hinted that they should remove me from their will. At this point, I couldn't care less about their will. Honestly, I don't want a single thing from this family. I've worked incredibly hard to build my own life, and I'm genuinely happy with what I have, far, far away from this constant chaos. So here I am, just watching my sister sink further and further, dragging everyone around her into her never-ending spiral of problems. And all I can think is, thank God I'm not part of this circus anymore. It's like watching from outside the cage as the monkeys run wild, causing mayhem everywhere they go. Edit for those wondering, Tiffany's lawsuit went absolutely nowhere. The result was about as predictable as you'd expect.